Hi, welcome to Linebreak Rugby's preview of the first test between the Lions and the All Blacks. It's Sim here, and it is only myself today. The rest of the guys are doing weird and wonderful things, such as painting their faces red in anticipation of a glorious, glorious Lions victory. Me, on the other hand, I'm not so sure. So let's start to break down, and the first thing we're going to look at today is selection and how I expect the selection to affect some of the key phases of the game, such as lineouts and restarts. Now, if having had a look at a few of the games where the Lions have been really successful, one of the things that stands out is that the New Zealand teams have really struggled to claim their own ball off lineouts and off restarts. Restarts are one of the key things that I want to look at, purely because it's mainly affected by the selections in the second row, the back row, and the back three of each team. And this is where I think that people have misinterpreted Gatland's selection in the wings and fullback area. In selecting Watson and Daly and Williams, I think that rather than, it is the more attacking option that is available to him, but it's also the combination of his fastest three back three players and the ones that are probably the most willing to get up after a kick, chase the kick and compete in the air, and then just put pressure and also make the tackle. Now, given that we've seen some of the teams that the Lions have played against struggle with the restarts and the high ball, having those kick chasers will add a massive point of value to the Lions. So I don't really expect them to influence the game in the way that people have expected to, with the counter-attack and running the ball back off the New Zealand players' kick, which leads me to the next part of the selection. So if you look at the equivalent back three of the All Blacks, what they have also done is pick their best three bomb disposal experts, if you want to call them that. So in Rieko Ioane, even though he struggled a bit with the Maori in wet conditions, which we'll probably see a little bit of in Auckland, with the weather forecast saying that there's going to be a lot of rain in the lead up to the game, but potentially a dry pitch and a dry ball for the match itself, notwithstanding the dew, of course. But with Rieko, what you have is somebody who's better in the air than Naholo and Savea, and also probably a better defender than the two, even though Naholo probably offers a unique point of value over the ball. I think that Rieko's probably been selected purely because he's a much better winger on the left, and Dag can't play on the left as well as he does on the right. What the other thing that the All Blacks have got in their back three is two really good kicking options. Now with Dag, you have one of the more experienced clearance kickers in Test Rugby. He's been doing the vast majority of the clearing kicks and for the All Blacks in combination with Carter and Cruden and Barrett since he made his debut in 2010. And he is pretty much selected over Naholo purely because of his ability under the high ball and his long range kicks, which can really flip field position, which I think is going to be crucial if we see the Lions adopt the kick orientated game that we're expecting to see. The other thing is that they do, all three of them offer the ability to come in off their wing and receive the ball at first or second receiver and attempt to make plays, given that Rieko Ioane's played in the past in the centre and has experience of trying to release players into space and pass them into space. Dag is one of the more effective at coming in off the wing and playing first receiver, and Ben Smith, as we all know, is a real classy playmaking option as well. So it's going to be a really interesting back three battle. But looking at the other aspect of restarts, the second row for the All Blacks has got a lot of experience in it. It's got their two most athletic locks in Whitelock and Retallick, but it also offers the much more athletic option of Scott Barrett, who even puts those two guys in the shade in terms of dynamism on the field. And one of the things that a lot of people have pointed to is the way that the Irish took the game to the All Blacks in Chicago. But one of the things that has been overlooked from that game is the absence of Whitelock and Retallick from the starting lineup, and the fact that Kano and Tuipulotu actually started that game. Now, Tuipulotu is a great player and a fantastic athlete, but one of the things he isn't is a consistent line-out jumper. And while Kano is a good backup jumper, when you put him as the primary option alongside Kieran Reid, you lose a lot of that in the line-out, but also from restarts. And whereas players like Luke Romano and Tom Franklin have struggled in recent weeks against the Lions, Retallick and Whitelock offer a real experienced pair of hands who have done it over and over again on the biggest stage for the All Blacks, and I don't think they'll have as many problems under the high ball and the restarts as their counterparts have had, but it remains a question mark, so it will be an interesting point to watch. Now, going on to Barrett as well, he offers somebody who can play at 6 and also in the second row. And if you have a look at the game from Chicago, the All Blacks actually outscored the Irish with 21 points to 15 while Barrett was on the field. And a lot of that comes from the fact that he did offer somebody who could help retain the ball from the line outs. And retaining their own ball really helped the All Blacks set that platform and chase the game against Ireland. Now, sometimes you can take games out of context by looking at teams playing from behind and expect them to score more points, just like that game in Chicago. But that was a game where Ireland had learned the lessons from their previous close call against the All Blacks and decided to keep pressing and keep playing their game that they'd started off with. So it's really important, and a good piece of context to get from that game is the All Blacks' performance with and without Scott Barrett in the team. And given the fact that Whitelock and Retallick are at the moment superior players, it's probably something where we're underestimating how good the All Blacks are if we're not taking into account the difference that they can make to a team. Now, if we look at the second row options that the Lions have picked, one of the things that I do question is picking Alan Wynne-Jones over Itoje. Now, Itoje is a far more dynamic player, somebody who brings real speed and athleticism to the team, and Alan Wynne-Jones I don't think brings any of those things. A lot of people have said that, well, when I say a lot of people, I mean a few people within Linebreak Rugby have espoused confidence in his handling abilities and the fact that he can manipulate the ref. But I haven't really ever seen anything special from him in terms of skills on the ball. And if we're saying that the main reason for picking him is his influence over the ref, I think that's a real down point to picking him over Itoje, especially when you consider the fact that Itoje can be picked to start and then you can have the impact of someone like Courtney Laws off the bench, which offers real impact at covering either the second row or the 6th spot, whereas Alan Wynne-Jones can really only either play the 4 or the 5. The most interesting selection debate though, and it hasn't really actually been debated that much since last year, but I do think it's something that everyone is overlooking, is whether Beauden Barrett is actually the best fly half to have in this situation. Now, while I agree that he is probably the most decisive rugby player on the planet, you do have to think that one of the things he thrives with is more space on the ball, his ability to run at gaps, and that can only be afforded to him in this kind of game if Aaron Smith plays one of his better games and really has consistency of variation and delivery on the ball, because Barrett does have a tendency to drop a lot deeper than somebody like Aaron Cruden does, and when you're against the rush defence, one of the more effective ways of playing against it can be the 10 that stands up flat in the pocket and distributes wider very fast, whereas Barrett is essentially rather like a fullback playing at 10. Now, that could work to the All Blacks' advantage though, but it does come back again to Aaron Smith, and if Aaron Smith has the kind of game where he's the primary playmaker, where he decides where we're going down the blind side or whether we're attacking on the open side, and if he's the primary decision maker and takes it out of Barrett's hands and lets Barrett do what he does best, which is attack a more broken opposition, then that could be something that the All Blacks can take advantage of. But if Barrett is the primary playmaker and the ball comes out to Barrett and the Lions have the option of just rushing up and closing down the space outside him, it could be a very long day for him, and it'll probably be something that he'd relish with Cruden coming on later on and allowing him to drop out of the game and come into the game as he wishes from a deeper position, such as either on the wing or at fullback. Another positional selection that could be quite crucial to the outcome of the game is the battle at number 12. Now, Sonny Bill Williams, a lot of people might assume has been selected because he can offload the ball and that might cause the rush defence some problems. But one of the other things that Sonny Bill Williams does provide is an excellent lateral defender who's got great agility and the ability to make sideline to sideline tackles and just cover the whole area of the pitch. Now, where that provides a contrast from the Lions 12, who you might assume has a similar style of playing, Benteo is a very physical and strong defender, but does have some weaknesses in his game that can be exploited, whereas lateral agility isn't the best. And if you can angle a run coming back from the outside to in, back into the teeth of the defence as you normally wouldn't do, you can catch him a little bit flat-footed, especially if you're trying to make him make a decision of whether he has to trust his outside man or make the tackle on the player coming back in. And that's one area of the attack where the All Blacks might find some success. And the next point that I wanted to look at was ways that the All Blacks can try and counter the Lions' rush defence, and exactly how the All Blacks will try and play in this game. Next area I wanted to have a look at is the rush defence and what the All Blacks could do to try and combat that. Now, they've got two principal kinds of techniques that they could use to try and combat the rush defence. The first of which we saw employed by the Highlanders. And what the Highlanders did was use their kicking options to put in very short attacking kicks, try and regather those on the other side and turn the rush defenders back, and then potentially make them hesitate more and more as the game went on. Now, part of the All Blacks game plan will be to try and fatigue the Lions by kicking long. And one of the common misconceptions about the All Blacks is that they always play a ball in hand game and try and attack from everywhere. The All Blacks kick a lot more often than most people realise, even the people who say that the All Blacks kick a lot. And one of the features of their game is they will often try and kick to compete or kick to keep the ball in play and make the other team kick back to them, where they can have the ball in a position which they can counter-attack from. But in respect of these short attacking kicks, that might be chip kicks or cross kicks from Beauden Barrett, or even somebody like Ryan Crotty, or it could be grubber kicks, which potentially any of their backline contingent could try and make. The other part of the combating the rush defence, and this comes back to why I think Aaron Smith is so crucial in this game, and his variety of flat passing, and especially him as a decision maker, is that he has the option to decide whether the All Blacks go to the blind side or the open side. And one of the biggest things that he can do to take pressure off Beauden Barrett is to go blindside as much as possible. Now, especially when the Lions have a numbers advantage or are manned up one-on-one on the open side, there's an option to go to the blind side where the Lions won't be able to rush up and defend. If he has a pack of forwards or a couple of backs to perhaps produce a link move, you can go to the blind side quickly if there's a quick recycle and try and move the ball that way and tie in more of the defenders for the Lions and bring them in from the open side and then produce an overlap that way. And that's one of the ways that the All Blacks will probably be looking to try and combat the rush defence, which they have seen quite often over the last few years, especially from the likes of South Africa. And one of the games that I think this first test might see a lot of parallels with is the 2015 World Cup semi-final against the South African team. And in that match as well, it was quite wet. There was a lot of talk about whether the conditions would favour the South Africans, but they did actually end up favouring the All Blacks, where they were more confident in their handling than the South Africans were, and ended up scoring, I think, one of the long tries, and then with a good performance from Dan Carter with the boot, took the win in a tight but fairly clear win. And that match also featured aggressive defence by a very physical Springbok pack, a very big, strong ball-running 10 in Andre Pollard, and a very kick-orientated game with Fourie du Preez, who's one of the preeminent box kickers of the last 10 to 15 years. And it really didn't work for South Africa that day. That's not to say it doesn't work for the Lions this year. And I think one of the key things that you can see from the way that matches have planned out where the All Blacks have lost in recent times, and the two that I wanted to look at most of all were the defeats by England and Ireland, so 2012 and 2016. The one common theme that you see in those matches is that the opposition made the All Blacks play from behind. Now, I think that if the Lions can put pressure on the All Blacks, and no matter how good a player is, no one plays as well with pressure in their face. And the other pressure that you can put on is scoreboard pressure. If the All Blacks are 6 points down in the first 10 minutes and they start to try and force things rather than playing their kicking game plan, trying to counter-attack off turnover ball, if they're then trying to play an Australian type game where Australia often try and force things too much, they could make more errors and play right into the hands of the Lions. So in a way, it's very crucial that in the first 10 to 15 minutes, if the Lions can get out to a 6+ point lead, that would pave the way for them to put the pressure on the All Blacks, put the onus on the All Blacks, and take the initiative away from them. But obviously that is a lot easier said than done, and the All Blacks do have a reputation for striking quite quickly at the start of games. And that's where I think territory will come into play a lot more than it has done in other matches. Now, we've seen a lot about pre-match from the Lions, about how they're expected to kick, put pressure on and contest the ball and try and force the game to be played in the All Blacks 22 or, at least behind their 10-metre line. And I do think it won't be a surprise if the All Blacks try and play a very similar way, where if they try and say to the Lions, okay, here's the ball, let's see what you can do with it. Let's see if we can put you under pressure and how you respond to that. The New Zealand players will be very used to playing in these kind of conditions and will be used to playing this kind of game plan. And in a way, it might play into their hands because they have got a very strong depth of tactical kickers. They've picked a very good tactical kicker at 9. They've got somebody with a great variety of kicking options at 10. And even at 13, with someone like Ryan Crotty, who has played a very significant role with the Crusaders when he plays in the 12 jersey to help Mo'unga with the kicking options, whether it's short attacking kicks or whether it's longer tactical or territorial kicking. And then on top of that, you do have Israel Dag, who's probably got the most significant impact in terms of with the kicking game for the All Blacks, especially when it comes to making exits. And one of the best producers of the up and under or the attacking kicking, Ben Smith. Now, if we do see that kind of game where the Lions do try and put 14 players into the line and have Liam Williams cover the whole backfield, it could be a real issue because almost 5 of these 7 backline players for the All Blacks can play an attacking kicking game and play it to a high level. And equally, many of them are very adept in the kick chase and closing down the kick receiver and trying to force over the turnover as well. And now, talking of turnovers, the breakdown battle will be crucial. What the All Blacks will try and do is try and run in forward pods and try to clear out the ball to try and get Aaron Smith as much space and as much time to release his pass while the defence is still fractured and potentially offside as possible. But the other thing that the All Blacks will try and do is try and produce the loop play. So when somebody like Charlie Faumuina or somebody like Joe Moody or Brodie Retallick has the ball, they will try and spread the play wider, and it's in those instances that we'll have to see whether the Lions bite upon the tackle or if they chase the outside defenders down as well. And one example where the All Blacks could be successful, and I know it was a long time ago in a game that seems a completely different and irrelevant game now, but one thing that Stephen Perifetta did when he received the ball from Charlie Faumuina on a similar play, and he spread it out wide to Rieko Ioane, and Ioane did the rest. Now, something like that could really hurt the Lions, and Beauden Barrett is a player who does have that wide passing game, and quite often he's at his most dangerous when he doesn't take the ball on at first receiver, but does take it on at second receiver. So if they can use the forwards as a decoy running option and pass the ball through the back again, that could potentially open up a lot of space on the outside, especially given the way that the rush defence can tend to narrow as the game goes on. Another way that the Lions could find things more tough as the game goes on, and granted this does depend on game flow because it won't apply if the Lions can slow the game down and play from a position in front, but if the game is tight, say perhaps within 5 points either way, or if the All Blacks do have a large lead, then the All Blacks will have the initiative to go and take control of the game and play at the tempo that they want to play at. And if we start to see a more extended ball in play time and a larger period of time with the ball in play between stoppages, then this is one area where I think that the All Blacks, with their greater skill set at fatigue levels, will really come to the fore. So while the Lions are very fit and at the peak of their athletic powers, One thing that they won't be able to do to the extent that the All Blacks can is execute at a high level when they are fatigued. And we have seen time and time again, though, with the All Blacks that their skills are so ingrained that they can produce that level of quality with their ball handling and pass and catch skills, even when they are very fatigued. And I think that what tends to happen is as the game goes on, especially we see the onslaught from the All Blacks in the last 20 minutes, is usually because a team gets really tired of defending and defending so intensely physically and also mentally that they just can't make those same reads as they did earlier in the match and start to offer the half gap a little bit more. And when you have players who have the catch and pass skills of the All Blacks, they can always try and work that little bit of extra space, and the tackles that were being made 20 minutes earlier might not be being made, and they can lead to crucial line breaks and scoring opportunities as well. But the best way for the Lions to combat this could be to play a more pick and roll orientated game. And this is one area where I definitely think they can get at the All Blacks. Now, as good as Aaron Smith is with his passing skills and his kicking skills, and there's no doubt in my mind that he's the premier passing and kicking scrum half in the world, one thing that he doesn't like to do is stick his head in where it hurts. Now, he doesn't tend to tackle much. He'll not try and clear out a breakdown if he desperately needs to. He would rather wait for his forward runners to come in and help him. And that's one of the big differences between the way that he and TJ Perenara play. But it does open up an opportunity for the Lions. And to an extent, the Irish did exploit this in 2016 as well, where they grabbed the ball from the base of the ruck, carried hard, and tried to either make Aaron Smith make the decision of whether he was going to let them go or get himself stuck at the bottom of a breakdown. And while he's not the worst defender, he isn't the greatest defender to have against a 110 kilo forward running down him. And that's one area where if the Lions can exploit that with some targeted pick and roll early in the game, they can draw the All Blacks defenders in, make sure that the likes of Sonny Bill Williams and Jerome Kano can't use their extreme lateral defensive ability to run outside and make tackles everywhere, but instead that they're turned inwards towards the ruck. And that will have a knock-on effect on the rest of the team as well. It'll be more likely to force offside penalties, penalties for hands in the ruck, and just generally provide more options to attack with quick ball. If the Lions can exploit that, then they'll definitely have a great chance of racking up the early points that I talked about earlier, and that'll be, I think, the clearest route for them to victory. An early lead, followed by lots of pressured pick and go, forcing the All Blacks to play from behind and forcing them to mistakes by pressuring Barrett and making sure that he plays more like he did against the Crusaders than he did against the Stormers. No mistake about it, the All Blacks are the best team in the world for a reason. They're full of quality from 1 to 23, and I definitely think they'll probably take a 12 to 20 point victory in the end. And on that note of glum contemplation for Brits and the Irish everywhere, let's see how it goes. Goodbye.